My wife blocked me on everything while she was on a girls' trip to Miami, a trip that I was fully paying for. I didn't panic. I didn't blow up her phone. Instead, I asked her best friend to pass along a very simple, very specific message. 30 minutes later, my phone lit up with 17 missed calls from the woman who did want to talk to me. Welcome back to Inspiration Seeker. If you love stories about instant karma, sweet revenge, and finding your self-worth, make sure to hit that subscribe button and smash the like. Also, let me know in the comments, what is the biggest red flag you've ever ignored in a relationship? Let's get into the story. The drive to O'Hare International Airport was suffocatingly quiet. You know that kind of silence? The heavy, thick kind that presses against your eardrums and makes the air conditioning sound like a jet engine. I was driving my wife, Evelyn, for her annual girls' trip to Miami. Usually, these send-offs were filled with excitement, music blasting, and plans for when she got back. But this time, the temperature inside my car was colder than the Chicago winter outside. For the past few months, things between us had been off. It was like living with a roommate who barely tolerated your existence. As I navigated to the morning traffic, Evelyn was busy scrolling on her phone, angling the screen away from me every time I glanced over. You know, Adam, she finally broke the silence, not looking up from her screen. I really need this break. You've been impossible lately. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. Impossible? I've been grinding, Evelyn. The architecture firm is finally taking off. I'm trying to secure our future. Yeah, well, you're married to your blueprints, not me, she scoffed. I feel like I'm single anyway, so I might as well act like in Miami. That comment stung, but I let it slide. I always let it slide. I convinced myself she was just stressed. When we pulled up to the departures terminal, I felt a knot form in my stomach, a gut feeling telling me something was fundamentally wrong. But being the supportive husband I was trying so hard to be, I ignored it. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my supplementary American Express card. Look, I said, handing it to her. I know I've been absent. Use this. Treat the girls to a nice dinner. Have fun. I just want you to be happy. She snatched the card without hesitation. Her eyes lit up, but not with love, with greed. Thanks, she muttered. She opened the door, grabbed her luggage, and walked away without even a goodbye kiss. As I watched her disappear into the terminal, I didn't feel like a husband saying goodbye to his wife. I felt like a bank vault that had just been raided. I sat there for a moment, watching the sliding doors close, trying to shake the feeling that I had just made a massive mistake. 2 days had passed since I watched Evelyn walk into the terminal, and back in Chicago, I threw myself into my work with ferocity that bordered on obsession. I was at my firm's office downtown, sitting in a glass-wall conference room that overlooked the city skyline. It was late, the kind of late where the cleaning crew had already come and gone, and the only light came from the glow of my laptop and the city lights below. But the late nights were worth it. I had just received the email that changed everything. My firm had officially won the bid for the Meridian Skyscraper project. This wasn't just another building. This was a contract that would put my name on the map, secure my financial freedom, and justify every single late night I had spent away from home. My hands were literally shaking with adrenaline as I read the confirmation. The first thought that popped into my head wasn't about the money or the fame. It was about Evelyn. I wanted to tell her that the sacrifice was worth it. I wanted to tell her that we had made it. I grabbed my iPhone, my thumb hovering over her contact photo, a picture of us from happier times, smiling on a boat in Lake Michigan. I tapped call. It rang once. Then, abruptly, it cut to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Evelyn. Leave a message. I frowned, pulling the phone away from my ear. Maybe she was in a dead zone, or maybe the reception in the club was bad. I didn't think much of it. I decided to send a text instead, typing out a message filled with excitement. Babe, pick up. I have incredible news. We got the Meridian contract. Life is about to change. I hit send and watched the screen, waiting for the familiar blue bubble of iMessage that indicated a secure, delivered message between iPhones. But the blue bubble didn't appear. Instead, the text turned instantly green. SMS. I stared at that green bubble, confused. Usually, that only happened when a phone was completely dead or turned off. But underneath the green bubble, a small, red error message appeared a few seconds later. Not delivered. A cold seed of doubt started to sprout in my chest. I tried calling again. This time, it didn't even ring. It went straight to voicemail. Instantaneously. That wasn't a connection issue. That was a rejection. My mind started racing. Was she okay? Was there an emergency? But then, I remembered how attached she was to her phone. Evelyn lived on social media. If she was awake, she was online. I opened Instagram. I wanted to check if she had posted any stories from Miami, maybe see if she was just busy having dinner. I typed her handle into the search bar. User not found. My heart skipped a beat. That had to be a glitch. I refreshed the app. I closed it and reopened it. I typed her name again, carefully, letter by letter. Nothing. No profile photo. No bio. No posts. It was as if she had been erased from the platform entirely. But I knew better. I knew exactly how these apps worked. I sat back in my expensive ergonomic office chair, the silence of the empty office suddenly feeling deafening. The realization hit me harder than the fatigue of the work week. My wife hadn't lost her phone. She hadn't run out of battery. She was on a luxury vacation, staying in a 5-star hotel that I was paying for, eating food that I was buying, and drinking cocktails charged in my name. And while she was living that life, she had made the conscious, deliberate decision to block my number and block me on social media. She didn't just want space. She wanted to erase me while still spending my money. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone across the room. I didn't drive to the airport to catch the next flight to Florida. Instead, a terrifyingly cold calm washed over me. It's a trait I developed as an architect. When a structure is failing, you don't panic. You assess the damage, find a fracture point, and determine if it can be saved or if it needs to be demolished. I left the office and drove home to our empty house. The silence in the living room was heavy, almost oppressive. I poured myself a glass of scotch, neat, and sat down on the couch in the dark. The blue light of my laptop screen was the only thing illuminating the room. If Evelyn thought blocking me was going to stop me from seeing what she was up to, she had severely underestimated the man she married. I logged out of my main Instagram account and logged into an old burner account I used for market research, a faceless profile with 0 followers and a generic username. I knew Evelyn would cover her tracks, but her best friend, Jessica was a clout chaser. She lived for validation. There was no way Jessica was in a VIP section in South Beach without broadcasting every single second of it to the world. And unlike Evelyn, Jessica hadn't blocked this random, anonymous account. I typed Jessica_XO into the search bar. Public profile. Bingo! Her story ring was glowing a bright, inviting gradient of pink and orange. I clicked on it. The first few clips were innocent enough. A boomerang of their fruity cocktails at the airport. A video tour of the hotel suite. The presidential suite. Panoramic views of the ocean, king-size beds, and expensive room service trays. Thanks to Adam. Jessica shouted in one of the clips, laughing. Hearing my name coming from her phone felt like a slap in the face. They were mocking me. Then came the night footage. The timestamp showed 2 hours ago. The video was chaotic. Flashing strobe lights, thumping bass that distorted the audio, and sparklers coming out of expensive champagne bottles. They were at LIV, one of the most expensive clubs in Miami. Jessica was filming herself singing along to a Dua Lipa song, panning the camera around the table to show off the bottle service. I watched it once. Then I watched it again. On the third view, I paused the video and held my finger on the screen to freeze the frame. In the background, just over Jessica's left shoulder, the lighting was dimmer, but it was clear enough for me. There was Evelyn. She wasn't dancing with the girls. She wasn't holding a drink. She was sitting comfortably on the lap of a man, her arms draped around his neck, whispering something into his ear that made him laugh. I took a screenshot and zoomed in. The pixels were a bit grainy, but I didn't need 4K resolution to recognize that jawline. It was Brad, her ex from college. The guy she swore was just a friend whenever I brought him up. The guy she claimed she had zero romantic interest in. My stomach dropped, but not from shock. It dropped from the sheer weight of the confirmation. This wasn't a girls' trip. This was a couple's retreat, and I was the unsuspecting sponsor. She had blocked me not because she needed space, but because she needed secrecy. She was playing house with her ex-boyfriend using my credit card, sleeping in a bed I paid for, effectively living a double life the moment she landed in Florida. The betrayal was absolute, but so was my resolve. The structure was failing, and it was time for a controlled demolition. I closed the browser tab with Jessica's Instagram profile. I didn't need to see any more blurry videos to know what was happening. The visual evidence was burned into my retinas, but now I needed the hard data. I needed to know exactly how much this betrayal was costing me. Literally. I opened a new tab and logged into my American Express Platinum account. My hands were steady now, moving with the precision of a forensic accountant investigating a crime scene. The dashboard loaded, and I clicked on Pending Transactions. The list that populated the screen was a long, scrolling testament to Evelyn's complete lack of respect for me. It wasn't just spending, it was hemorrhaging. First, there was a hotel charge. I knew I had authorized her to book a nice room, but the charge pending from the Faena Hotel was $8,400. That wasn't a room. That was a down payment on a car. She hadn't just booked a suite, she had booked the presidential suite. She was living like a celebrity on an architect's salary, banking on the fact that I would be too busy working to notice the details until a monthly statement arrived. Then I scrolled down to the dinner charges from earlier that evening. A transaction at Prime 112, a high-end steakhouse, stared back at me. The total came to $2,540. I clicked on the transaction details. Usually, credit card statements are vague, but I have a habit of saving receipts and tracking expenses closely for tax purposes, and my app often syncs with digital receipts. I looked at the breakdown. 3 tomahawk ribeye steaks, 3 lobster tails, 2 bottles of Opus 1 wine, 3 desserts. The math was simple, brutal, and undeniable. Evelyn and Jessica were the only 2 people on this trip, supposedly. 2 women do not accidentally order 3 full-course meals at a steakhouse. I sat there, staring at the number 3 on the screen, and the realization washed over me like a bucket of ice water. I wasn't just a husband who was being cheated on. I was the financier of the affair. I was the one waking up at 5 a.m., dealing with difficult contractors, stressing over zoning laws, and grinding my soul into dust to earn this money. And meanwhile, Evelyn was down in Miami, taking the money I earned with my sweat and stress, and using it to buy a $150 steak for Brad. I was effectively buying dinner for the man who was sleeping with my wife. It was a specific kind of humiliation. It made me feel small. It made me feel used. All those times she called me cheap for wanting to save for investments. All those times she rolled her eyes when I talked about budgeting. It wasn't because we lacked money. It was because she viewed me not as a partner, but as a utility. I was nothing more than an ATM with a pulse to her, a walking, talking credit limit. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the grim expression on my face. The sadness I felt earlier evaporated completely. In its place, a cold, hard resolve solidified in my chest. If she wanted to treat me like a bank, fine, but she was about to learn a very important lesson about economics. What happens when the bank freezes your assets due to suspicious activity? I sat in the silence of my home office for exactly 5 minutes after closing the bank tab. I wasn't hyperventilating. I wasn't throwing vases against the wall. I was calm. It was a terrifyingly lucid state of mind, the kind you get right before you make a decision that you know you can never take back. Tears are for men who still have hope. I had none left. I picked up my phone, but not to call Evelyn. I dialed the emergency line for my attorney. It was 2 a.m. in Chicago, but I pay a premium retainer for a reason. I left a voicemail that was short, clinical, and devoid of emotion. Robert, it's Adam. I need you to draft divorce papers immediately. Adultery. I have digital evidence and financial records. Also, I need to know the fastest way to liquidate the joint accounts before she drains them. Call me at 7 a.m. sharp. Next came the finances. This was the part one was actually looking forward to. I reopened the American Express app. My thumb hovered over the image of the platinum card, the shiny piece of plastic that was currently sitting in Evelyn's purse in a Miami nightclub, or perhaps on a bedside table next to Brad. I navigated to the card management section. I didn't just lower the limit. I didn't pause it. I selected the option, report lost or stolen. The app asked for confirmation. Are you sure? This will immediately deactivate the current card and decline all future transactions. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I whispered to the empty room. I tapped confirm. The little loading wheel spun for a second, and then a green checkmark appeared. Done. In the blink of an eye, the financial lifeline I had been feeding her was severed. But I wasn't finished. I opened our home security app. I scrolled to the smart locks section for the front door and the garage. The current code was her birthday. How cliché. I deleted it. I punched in a new code, random, complex, and utterly impossible for her to guess. The digital mechanism on the front door whirred softly in the distance as the deadbolt reconfigured itself. She was now effectively a stranger to this house. Finally, I stood up and walked to the master bedroom. I turned on all the lights, flooding the room with harsh brightness. I went to the closet, a walk-in closet I had designed specifically for her, complete with custom lighting and cedar shelves. I looked at the rows of designer bags, the racks of dresses, the shelves of shoes, Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Prada, all gifts from me, all symbols of my attempt to buy her affection when my time wasn't enough. I went to the garage, grabbed a stack of heavy-duty moving boxes and a roll of packing tape, and marched back upstairs. I didn't fold things neatly. I didn't wrap them in tissue paper. I swept entire shelves into the cardboard boxes with my arm. The sound of expensive leather hitting the bottom of a cardboard box was surprisingly satisfying. I taped the boxes shut, labeled them with a thick black marker, Evelyn, and hauled them one by one down to the garage. The garage was unheated, damp, and smelled of gasoline and dust. It was a fitting place for the remnants of our marriage. By the time I was done, the master closet was half empty. Echoing the emptiness I felt in my chest. I stood in the driveway, looking at the pile of boxes. I had physically and digitally dismantled our life together in under 2 hours. I was exhausted, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. It was nearly 3:30 in the morning by the time I sat back down at my desk. The physical labor of packing Evelyn's life into boxes had left me sweating, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. The house was quiet, a different kind of quiet now. It wasn't the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of a clean slate. I picked up my phone. It felt heavy in my hand, like a loaded weapon. I knew that down in Miami, the party was probably just winding down. They were likely stumbling back to that overpriced suite, laughing about how they were pulling the wool over my eyes, maybe ordering one last round of room service on my dime. They had no idea that their financial safety net had been cut 45 minutes ago. I unlocked the screen and opened Instagram again. I navigated back to the burner account I had created. Evelyn had blocked me, thinking that would silence me. She thought that by cutting off my digital access to her, she controlled the narrative. She was wrong. She had just forced me to use a different channel of communication. I clicked on Jessica's profile. The message button was right there, blue and inviting. I started typing. I didn't want to write a novel. I didn't want to send a wall of text filled with, "Why did you do this?" Or, "I loved you." That would only give them satisfaction. It would show them I was hurt. I didn't want to show hurt. I wanted to show power. I wanted to show them that I was the one holding the keys, literally and figuratively. I drafted the message carefully, reading it over 3 times to ensure there were no typos, no emotional outbursts, just cold, hard facts. "Hey, Jessica," I typed. "I know Evelyn blocked me, so I need you to be the messenger. Please tell her I hope she's enjoying the presidential suite. It looks spacious. I also saw the bill from the steakhouse. 3 entrees for 2 girls seems like a lot, doesn't it? Oh, and tell Brad I said hello. I saw him on your story." I paused, my thumb hovering over the next sentence. This was a kill shot. "I just want to let you guys know that I've reported my Amex card as stolen. It's been deactivated effective immediately. The hotel is going to ask for a new card for the incidentals and the remaining balance upon checkout. I hope Brad's credit limit is high enough to cover the rest of your vacation. Good luck. I stare at the words. It was professional. It was polite. It was devastating. It stripped away all the lies in 3 short sentences. It acknowledged the affair without asking for an explanation, and it delivered the consequence without raising a voice. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs, and tapped the blue arrow. Sent. The word seen didn't appear immediately, but I knew it would soon. Jessica was the type of person who checked her DMs every 5 minutes. I placed the phone face down on the marble countertop of my kitchen island. I walked over to the coffee machine and started brewing a fresh pot. I didn't need to sleep. I wanted to be awake for this. I wanted to be fully conscious when the bomb I just dropped finally exploded over South Beach. The clock on the microwave read 3:45 a.m. I was sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a mug of black coffee, watching the steam curl into the air. The house was dead silent, a stark contrast to the storm I knew was brewing 1,000 miles away. I wasn't pacing. I wasn't checking the time every 10 seconds. I was simply waiting, practicing the kind of patience you learn when you know the outcome is inevitable. 10 minutes after I sent the DM to Jessica, my phone buzzed once. It wasn't a text. It was a notification from the American Express app. I slid the phone over and glanced at the screen. Transaction alert, declined. Amount, $450. Merchant, Faena Hotel room service. I smirked, taking a sip of my coffee. They must have tried to order a late-night feast to celebrate their deception, only to find out the bank was closed. The card had worked perfectly for the steakhouse, so the decline must have been a shock. I imagined confusion, the waitress standing there awkwardly, while Evelyn frantically tried to swipe it again. 20 minutes later, the real show began. My phone, which had been laying flat on the cold marble counter, suddenly lit up. The vibration hummed against the stone. I looked down. The name Wifey flashed across the screen. The irony was palpable. This was the same woman who, just 48 hours ago, had blocked my number because she needed space. She had cut off all lines of communication when it suited her. But now that the financial faucet had been turned off, suddenly, that space wasn't so necessary anymore. Suddenly, talking to her husband was the most important thing in the world. I let it ring. The ringtone, a song she had picked out for herself years ago, echoed through the empty kitchen. It rang until it went to voicemail. 2 seconds later, it rang again, and again, and again. I didn't silence it. I didn't decline it. I just watched. It was like watching a desperate animal caught in a trap of its own making. Then came the text messages, flooding in so fast the notifications stacked on top of each other. I could read the previews without unlocking the phone. Adam, pick up. Something is wrong with the card. Babe, please answer. The hotel security is here. They think we're frauding them. Just show me the DM. You have it all wrong. Brad just showed up randomly. We can't check out. They won't let us leave the lobby until the bill is settled. Pick up. I took another slow sip of coffee. The panic in her text was delicious. Brad just showed up randomly? That was rich. You don't randomly sit on an ex-boyfriend's lap in a VIP booth. You don't randomly order dinner for 3. The phone vibrated again. Call number 10. Call number 12. I visualized the scene. Evelyn in the lobby of a 5-star hotel, mascara running, arguing with stern-faced manager, while Brad, the man she chose over me, probably stood there with his pockets empty, unable to pay for the lifestyle he was borrowing. By the time the sun started to peek through the blinds, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor, the phone finally stopped buzzing. I tapped the screen to check the final tally. 17 missed calls. 17 times she tried to reach the man she didn't respect. 17 times she tried to use me to fix a mess she created. I set the mug down, the ceramic clinking softly against the counter. I didn't feel guilty. For the first time in a long time, I felt valuable. I realized that my silence was more powerful than any argument I could have had with her. By not answering, I wasn't just ghosting her. I was holding a mirror up to her face and forcing her to look at her own reflection. It took Evelyn exactly 48 hours to find her way back to Chicago. Without my platinum card to cushion the blow, her return trip wasn't the first-class experience she was used to. I imagined she had to beg, borrow, or perhaps even sell some of her designer accessories just to scrape together enough cash for a last-minute economy ticket. It was Tuesday morning, a gray, overcast day typical of the Midwest. I was standing in the foyer, adjusting the cuffs of my bespoke navy suit in the mirror. I looked good, rested, focused. I had a meeting with the developers for the Meridian project in an hour, and for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the heavy invisible weight of a failing marriage on my shoulders. The sound of a car door slamming shattered the morning calm. I walked to the side window and peered through the blinds. A yellow cab was pulling away from the curb, not the private black car service she usually demanded. Evelyn stood on the sidewalk, surrounded by her luggage. She looked diminished. Her hair was frizzy, thrown into a messy bun. She was wearing oversized sweatpants, and even from this distance, I could see the dark circles under her eyes. The Miami glow had faded, replaced by the pale, frantic look of desperation. She marched up the driveway, dragging her suitcases behind her like anchors. She didn't look like a wife coming home. She looked like a fugitive seeking sanctuary. She reached the front door, and I heard the familiar beep, 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 beep of her punching in her birthday code on the smart lock. Buzz. Error. I watched the small LED ring on the lock turn a harsh, unforgiving red. She paused, confused. She shifted her weight and typed in again, slower this time, stabbing the buttons with her manicured nails. Buzz. Error. Access denied. What the hell? I heard her muffle through the thick oak door. Panic set in. She tried a third time, then a fourth, when the lock went into security lockout mode and emitted a piercing siren chirp. She snapped. She started pounding on the door with her fist. Adam! Adam! I know you're in there. Open this door. It's freezing. I waited a full 10 seconds before moving. I checked my watch. I straightened my tie one last time. Then I unlocked the deadbolt from the inside and swung the door open. I didn't step back to let her in. I stood squarely in the frame, blocking the entrance. Adam! She shrieked, pushing past her suitcases to get closer. The smell of stale airplane air and anxiety clung to her. Are you insane? You changed the codes? You cut off my cards? Do you have any idea what happened to me? I was humiliated. The police were almost involved. She was breathless, her eyes wild, waiting for me to apologize. She was waiting for me to cave, to hug her, to say it was all a big misunderstanding. Instead, I looked at her with the same detached interest I would show a stranger soliciting on my porch. I know exactly what happened, Evelyn. I said, my voice dangerously calm. You tried to pay for a vacation with your boyfriend using your husband's money. And when the transaction declined, you realized that without me, you couldn't even afford a ride to the airport. Her mouth dropped open. Boyfriend? Adam, that is ridiculous. Jessica told you. Brad was just there. It was a coincidence. She tried to push past me into the warmth of the house, but I didn't budge. I held my ground. The woman standing before me wasn't my wife anymore. She was a trespasser in a life she had forfeited the moment she sat on another man's lap. I stepped aside, just barely, creating a narrow gap for her to squeeze through. I didn't invite her into the living room. I let her stand in the foyer on the cold marble floor, surrounded by the echoes of a house that was no longer a home. You have 5 minutes, I said, checking my watch again. Make them count. Evelyn dropped her bags and immediately launched into a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Tears streamed down her face as she reached for my hand, a hand I quickly pulled away. Adam, you have to believe me, she pleaded, her voice trembling. It was Jessica. She invited Brad. I was drunk. I was vulnerable. He sat on that chair, and I just fell into it. It meant nothing. I love you. I blocked you because I was ashamed, not because I was hiding anything. Please, don't throw away 5 years of marriage over one stupid mistake in Miami. I watched her crumble, listening to the script I knew she had rehearsed on the flight home. It was compelling. If I were the same man I was last week, the blind, devoted husband, I might have believed her. I might have thought this was a lapse in judgment fueled by margaritas and peer pressure. But I wasn't that man anymore. I reached onto the console table behind me and picked up a thick manila envelope. I hadn't opened it until this morning, even though my private investigator had delivered it days ago. I held out to her. One mistake. I asked, my voice devoid of pity. Open it. She hesitated, her trembling hands taking the envelope. She undid the string clasp and slid the contents out. As she shuffled through the glossy 8x10 photographs, her face went from pale to ghost white. The photos didn't show Miami. They showed Chicago. There was a photo of her and Brad having coffee in Wicker Park 3 months ago. A photo of them entering a boutique hotel downtown while I was at a conference. A photo of his car parked in our driveway, my driveway, on a day I had left early for a site visit. I didn't hire the investigator because of Miami, Evelyn. I said softly. I hired him 6 months ago when you started hiding your phone screen. Miami wasn't a mistake. It was just the first time you got caught publicly. The silence in the foyer was absolute. The sobbing stopped instantly. The mask fell. She stared at the photos, realizing that her narrative of the innocent wife had just been incinerated. You knew? She whispered, looking up at me with terror in her eyes. You knew this whole time? Then why did you give me the card? Why did you let me go? Because I needed you out of the house, I replied, leaning against the wall. See, the Meridian project I won? It's not in Chicago. It's in New York City. I accepted the position of lead architect for the firm's Manhattan branch 3 days ago. I gestured around the foyer. While you were partying with Brad on my dime, I wasn't just sulking. I was finalizing the sale of this house. The realtors are coming in 2 hours to stage it. The movers are coming tomorrow to take my things to New York. I looked her dead in the eye. I didn't block you from my life because I was angry, Evelyn. I blocked you because I was finally done paying for your lifestyle. The girls' trip was just a perfect distraction. I needed to pack up my life without you getting in the way. You didn't leave your husband for a week. You left your meal ticket forever. 1 year later, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse in Lower Manhattan, the wind whipping through the city canyons. Below me, the endless grid of New York City glittered like a sea of diamonds. To my left, the steel skeleton of the Meridian Tower was rising, a project that bore my signature, a legacy that I was building with my own hands. The air up here tasted different. It didn't taste like betrayal or stale arguments. It tasted like freedom. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. It wasn't pretty, but it was decisive. Evelyn and her lawyers tried everything. They demanded alimony. They demanded to share my firm. They even tried to claim emotional distress because I had canceled the credit cards while she was on vacation. But facts are stubborn things. The forensic accounting of her spending, combined with the time-stamped photos of her affair with Brad, made the prenup ironclad. She walked away with what she came into the marriage with. Her clothes, her car, and her regrets. I heard through the grapevine, mutual friends who I haven't bothered to cut off yet, that she and Brad didn't last 2 months. Apparently, Brad's credit limit wasn't high enough to sustain the lifestyle Evelyn felt she deserved. I took a sip of my vintage bourbon, leaning against the glass railing. Being alone in a city of 8 million people should have felt isolating. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel lonely. There's a massive difference between being alone and being lonely. In that house in Chicago, sleeping next to a woman who viewed me as a paycheck, I was the loneliest man on earth. Here, standing by myself, I felt complete. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was a new phone with a new number. I scrolled through my contacts. No wifey, no drama, just clients, colleagues, and real friends who respected me for who I was, not what I could buy them. I thought back to that night in the kitchen, the vibrating phone, the panic, 17 missed calls. Back then, those missed calls felt like a crisis. Looking back now, I realized they were the death rattle of a toxic life. Those weren't calls of love. They were the desperate attempt of a parasite trying to reattach itself to the host. My silence wasn't just a petty act of revenge. It was an act of self-preservation. It was the moment I stopped asking, why is she doing this to me? And started asking, why am I allowing this? If you are listening to this story right now, and you feel like you're giving 100% to someone who only gives you 10% back, take a look at your phone. Take a look at your bank account. Take a look at your soul. Don't be afraid to change the locks. Don't be afraid to cancel the card. And most importantly, do not be afraid to let the phone ring. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say to someone who doesn't value you is absolutely nothing at all. This has been Inspiration Seeker. If this story helped you realize your own worth, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you are the architect of your own life. Don't let anyone else wreck your home.